Hey guys, it's Jenna, and today we're doing our 10-minute Pilates flow, focusing on the lateral muscles of the hip. So those are the muscles on the side of your hip, and they are often overlooked and not worked or used enough. Those muscles are often tight and weak, so we want to find a nice balance between stretching and releasing those muscles, as well as working on them, because they often have a lot to do with how you're walking. They stabilize your hips so they can do with low back or SI joint pains. And so if we strengthen those muscles, it can often help to relieve low back pain, hip pain, improve your gait, and your general overall full body wellness and health. So we're going to go ahead and start on a side lying position. You can use a block, pillow, or bolster under your head. If you don't have any of those handy, then just go ahead and put your arm under your head. So from here, you're going to start with your hand on your hip. You want to line up your heels with your sits bones as if you were just stacking up your body against the wall behind you. From there, you want to think about bringing your ribs in so that you're in a neutral spine and you're not overarching your back. We'll start with a set of clamshells. As you exhale, the knee lifts. As you inhale, it lowers down. Exhale to lift, inhale to lower. So the muscles that you want to be feeling while you're doing this exercise, your deep lateral hip rotator muscles, which live pretty close to your sits bones. So if you put your hand down there at your lower glute or your sits bone area, then you want to feel those muscles turn on and kind of bulk up into your hand. You may just even need to slow down a little bit to see if you can feel those muscles working. Because if you do this exercise without being conscious of which muscles you're using, you'll most likely be overusing the piriformis, which is already a very over-tight, overworking muscle. So the other thing you want to think about doing here is stabilizing your pelvis so that your hip bones stay stacked and your pelvis is not rolling backwards each time your leg lifts. So then from there, we'll do an exercise for the glute medius. That is the muscle that lives on the side of your hip. As you exhale, the heel will lift. Inhale to lower down. As you exhale, the leg will lift. As you inhale, it lowers down. You just want to make sure that you're lining up your heel with your sits bone so that the leg is not swinging forward. From what I've seen working with clients doing this exercise is they always swing their leg forward. Almost nobody has it in the proper position. So it's definitely something you want to get up and look at your leg and make sure that your heel is lined up with your sits bone, because the quads and the TFL are always going to want to pull that leg forward. They're stronger than the hamstring and the glutes and the glute medius. So keep looking at your leg, keep making sure that you're taking it back in line with your sits bone. Another way that you can do this is to have your body lined up against a wall, and that way you could just be dragging your heel up the wall, and then you would kind of know where your leg is in space. Now we're going to take the leg up and draw a circle with your heel on the wall in front of you. And as you're doing that, you want to make sure that you're hitting the upper back corner. That's the area that's kind of the hardest because it's the weakest muscles that do that action. So you could also be thinking about you're trying to hit where the wall and the ceiling meet. Go ahead and switch sides. We make it small enough so that we can stabilize the pelvis. So you could try making it a little bigger, but the tendency will be to roll the pelvis as you're doing that. So I suggest starting about the size of a Frisbee and then going from there. Go ahead and relax. You can give your hip a little massage. Should feel those muscles even burning by now. We're going to try one more exercise. The leg starts in a 90-degree tabletop position. On the inhale, you hinge into the hip, bringing it forward. On the exhale, you go back. This is the first modification that you can start with. The second one, if this doesn't feel like it's enough challenge for you, is to straighten your leg, kick it back, kick it forward. You want to make sure with either variation that you're keeping your low back and pelvis stable. So you're not arching your back, you're not tucking your pelvis under it all, your belly is pulled in, your ribs are back, all of that good stuff. One more time like that. Nice. Okay, good. So you can give your hip one more massage, and that just brings the blood and the oxygen back into that muscle, and it will help to deliver some of the inflammation and waste products out of the muscle so that then your muscles can repair and heal. Let's go ahead and switch sides and do that on the other side, starting with those clamshells. So make sure that your body is lined up against the wall behind you. You'll exhale to lift the knee, inhale to lower it down. If you have a hard time feeling your lower glutes, I'll show you 2 tricks. So one trick would be to push your sits bone forward into your fingers, and that should help you feel those lower, deeper hip rotators turn on. If that doesn't get it on, you can try to squeeze your heels together, and that usually works. So if you're not feeling the right muscles fire, it's always good to try a couple things to make sure that you're using the proper muscles. Otherwise, you'll just be working and strengthening an already tight, overworking muscle. Let's move on to the next one. So leg is straight. Reach out through your heel. Exhale to lift, inhale to lower. You want to make sure your pelvis is staying really stable. So if you're feeling any pain in your low back and your hip and your SI joint, it just may be that you don't quite have your pelvis stable. And so by bringing your top hand on your hip, you'll be able to feel whether or not your hip is hiking or your pelvis is rolling backwards. Let's go into the next one. We're doing circles now. So you're doing about the size of a frisbee to start. If that feels pretty easy, you could try a little bit bigger, but we always want to try to do it a little bit smaller if needed so that we can work on that stability. And that way we can protect the low back. We can protect the hip, the SI joint. We want to keep everything safe from injury. Let's go ahead and do the reverse. You can use your exhale to circle and your inhale to do the next circle. So each movement has a breath. Last 2 and 1. Let's take a little break before we do the next one because that was already a lot of hip work. So the last one, we're almost there. Knee to chest. Exhale, push it back. Make sure you're not flaring your ribs. So I'm doing this little trick, putting one thumb on my rib cage, my fingers on my lower belly, and I want to make sure that distance doesn't expand or get longer, but it stays the same. So when I'm going back with my leg, I could even think about shortening the distance between my ribs and my hips. And then if you wanted to try that straight leg variation, you could always do it that way. It increases the challenge because the longer lever is pulling on your spine, so you have to work harder in your core to stabilize your back. You can also imagine that you're just sweeping your leg across a tabletop. So you keep the leg in the same level the whole time. Nice. So you're probably feeling it big time in your hip. We'll just end here with a couple stretches. So the first stretch is flip over onto your back. It's called the figure 4 stretch. You've probably seen this one before. This is a great stretch for your piriformis. So that's an often really tight, overworking muscle, as I mentioned earlier. So by doing this stretch, you're kind of allowing for that muscle to relax, and that way you are increasing the efficaciousness of those exercises that we just did for the lateral rotators of the hip. So we always want to kind of stretch and release a tight muscle and then work on strengthening the weaker muscles around it. Let's go ahead and do that on the other side. Breathing into the hip. You can really send and direct the breath to any areas of tension, just totally relaxing and letting go. And when you're ready, we will release that stretch. We'll bring the feet wide to the outer edges of your mat. You'll cross your right leg over, or your right ankle over your left knee, rather, and start to bring the legs over to the side. This is a TFL, glute medius, and even a little bit of a QL stretch. If this feels too intense, you could always back off a little bit and do a little less. Nice. So from there, let's go ahead and slowly bring the legs back up and try that on the other side. So the legs start a little wider than we did before. So wide as your mat. Gently draw the knee over. You're internally rotating your hip here. So internal rotation is a very therapeutic position of the hip. It's often limited when we have degeneration of the hip. So arthritis, often the first sign is limited internal rotation of your hip. And so by doing these types of stretches, you're helping to increase that range of motion to lubricate and regenerate the joint. If this is uncomfortable and painful, you probably want to just back off of it a little bit. And one thing you could do is just bring your knees together with your feet wide apart. This is still internal rotation of the hip. It's just passive. You're kind of allowing the legs to fall towards each other and just allowing them to be fully supported. Okay, you can go ahead and roll up. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed that work that we did for the lateral muscles of the hip. You can go ahead and DM me with any questions or post a comment below, and I will get back to you about any questions with these exercises. I will see you in the next video.